Hello, today we're going to be discussing different research studies showing that parasites can cause inflammation and neurological damage and symptoms that are associated with neurodegenerative diseases. My name is Pam Bartha. If we haven't met yet, I am the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. And I am incredibly passionate about this topic because 29 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I'm really happy to share with you that I've been MS-free for the past 29 years because I took a different path, because I decided to treat infections. By the grace of God, I learned very early on in my journey that my symptoms were all caused by infections. But we didn't have the information, we didn't have the research that we have today, the insights. And so it was a really hard journey by myself. But I'm here to share with you some really exciting, more information. And what I'd really like you to do is, if you yourself suffer with chronic disease, not just MS, but maybe some other type of, you're having neurological symptoms, or maybe you've got a diagnosis of some type of neurological disease, make sure to pay attention to this and also share it with other people that you know are looking for answers, because the more we can get this information out, the more we can get different types of researchers and even our healthcare professionals to start looking in a different area, the sooner we're going to bring change. I just want to say hello to a few people, and please interact with me because I'm staring at my computer. It's nice to see the hearts and the thumbs up. Hello, Roberta and Teresa. Ruth, I'm sure you guys can hear me. Hi, Rick and Kelly. Sounds like everything is good. And Tiffany. All right, so I'm going to go into this. So thank you for your love. And 2018 was a really huge year for me and for the Wellness Champions, because we had known for 30 years that fungus plays a really big part in chronic disease, multiple sclerosis and all chronic disease, and many different types of fungi. And then over the past 10 years, we've really learned a lot about Lyme disease and how Borrelia and Babesia and Bartonella and all those vector-borne infections can cause a lot of neurological symptoms. We knew parasites were an issue, but we had no idea that parasites were as big of an issue in neurological diseases as we are learning. And we are learning this crazy. So number one, in last year, the first thing that really opened my eyes, well, let me backtrack first. You know, I have suspected that I've had parasites for many years, and I've gone to the health food stores and I've done lots of different, parasite cleanses. And I think that I probably did a good job, because instead of buying the things in the health food store way back in the day, I was buying the bulk herbs and I was drinking a lot of wormwood tea and different things, and it really helped. And I'm sure that was part of my recovery. And I just didn't know. I just knew to treat parasites, but I really didn't know what I was doing. But now, like in 2018, we had this so exciting research from Dr. Alan McDonald, who is a very well-respected pathologist in the United States. And I think it's back in 2014 that he was sharing his research that he was finding little parasitic nematodes in the blood. No, sorry, not in the blood. That was another person, but in the spinal fluid, especially, yes, in the brain, but mostly in the spinal fluid, of people that have died from multiple sclerosis in every single sample that he tested. So 10 out of 10, he found tons of these little worms in the spinal fluid. The significance of that is, for the past 100 years, veterinarians have known that when these worms get in the spinal fluid or the central nervous system of domestic animals, they have symptoms identical to multiple sclerosis, but also other neurological diseases. So they have things like balance issues and vision issues and going blind and severe fatigue and the drop foot and the spastic gait and numbness and paralysis. It's like when you see the symptoms those animals suffer with, it's so freaky, because you think, how is this possible? For 100 years, we never thought to look and see if possibly parasites could be in the central nervous system. So I'm working with amazing wellness champions. I coach people, and I have Live Disease Free Academy. It's a 90-day program, and I'm helping people to recover. And we are treating infections. So we're first, not stop feeding them. Secondly, support the body, build it up. Thirdly, look at which symptoms you have, and then start treatment. And we see now that people with chronic disease are infested with parasites, and some of them we can't see. But our students are passing tons of big worms, passing small worms. One of our students shared with me that she's counted 300 worms. And she has shared tons and tons of pictures, and I can promise you they're worms. They're not fiber, and that's the cool thing. And I have shared some videos where you guys can actually go and see this yourself. So on our YouTube channel and Facebook, Live Disease Free, go back to MS and parasitic worms. You can see just a couple of pictures, but I've got a library of them, and I'm sharing them with different practitioners also. So the exciting thing is that we are learning this. And sometimes those really big worms, they are not causing the symptoms of the spasticity and the balance, etc. It could be the smaller worms. It could be those little nematodes in the central nervous system and the spinal fluid. But then one of my wonderful wellness champions, she just passed on a study to me, and it was looking at a study of a woman who's 53 years old, a case study. This is all science, peer-reviewed science, where she, and I'll talk about her, but basically she was infected with a tapeworm and having a lot of neurological symptoms, and they tried to do normal treatment with her. Nothing was working, which it usually doesn't really work with those of us that have MS anyhow. And so they ended up, I have no idea why, but they tested her for antibodies against the dog tapeworm and found she had antibodies against. So they treated her with an antiparasitic drug, and she had a lot of symptom improvement. And again, it didn't say she was cured, but it said her MRI had cleared up and that she had alleviated her symptoms. So, but I just want to go back, and this is so new, and I'm doing so many different things, and I'm trying to do research on the side. So this is literally, I spent just the hour before this event right now, just doing a little bit more searching on the studies. And I found this study, a 2011 study, looking at 17 people that had come in, and they looked at, they were suffering with neurological symptoms, and they looked at their blood work, they looked clinically and lab tests at these 17 people. They had evidence of spinal cord disease. So they had all kinds of sensory and motor and autonomic dysfunction, predominantly in the lower part, like probably from the waist down. And they either had a progressive form or relapsing remitting, sound familiar, and mild to moderate disability. So they were kind of all over the map, kind of like those of us that are diagnosed with MS. Some of us, we're more disabled than others. It's hitting us quicker, slower. But the interesting thing is that only 2 of these patients showed a higher level of eosinophils in their blood. And eosinophils are the white blood cells that fight parasites. So even though these people tested positive for parasites, they didn't all have higher than normal eosinophils. So that's really important to know. And that will really make it hard for doctors to find these, that we're dealing with parasites, because they might do a test and say, oh, your eosinophils are normal, you don't have a parasitic infection. They have to go deeper. That's the key. So they looked at MRIs, and they found that they did have a lesion in their central nervous system. And so they did a test. They tested them, and I don't know why they test them for, maybe they did various parasite tests. I'm not sure how they came up with testing them for the dog tapeworm, but they did, and they found antibodies in their blood, but also in their spinal fluid. So that is the key, is maybe we shouldn't be looking at our white blood count like the eosinophils, but we should be actually looking at, do we have antibodies, a lot of antibodies against certain infections? And then also, I know that a lot of the newer tests, they're looking at DNA, and that would also help. So they found that all of these 17 people tested positive for antibodies. They had antibodies for this dog tapeworm. They treated them with albendazole, and they had a marked improvement, a marked neurological improvement in their symptoms, and their MRIs normalized. So they shared, as in conclusion, that the anti-helminthic treatment, so that is like deworming treatment, is associated with a good outcome. That was a 2011 study. The one that my student shared with me is a 2017 study. And in this study, there was a 53-year-old woman that was admitted to a Department of Neurology, and she had thoracic thoracic mellitus. So basically, mellitus is inflammation of the spinal cord. So we can have damage to the myelin or even the nerve cells themselves. And thoracic means that it's the part of our spinal column that is kind of in the rib cage area. So probably like, behind our lungs, in that area. So she was having damage in that part of her spinal cord. And so she had a previous episode of optic neuritis. So she had that before. And then she came back and she started to have more neurological symptoms, even though she had been treated for the optic neuritis. And again, they detected antibodies in her serum, in her blood, against the tapeworm, the dog tapeworm. And I have no idea why they thought of doing that. I haven't read the whole article, but maybe they were just ruling out different types of parasites. So the interesting thing is they did detect those antibodies. So they decided to treat her again with albendazole, and she was able to alleviate the symptoms by doing that. So this is really exciting. And I want to stop for a minute and I want to share this with you. If you have multiple sclerosis, please don't think that if you go on albendazole, you're going to be cured, because I'm working with wellness champions and it is a helpful antiparasitic drug for some, but for some it isn't. You have to do multiple things. By the time you have ALS, Parkinson's, MS, any of those really difficult, devastating neurodegenerative diseases, we have to understand we have several parasites and we have several fungi and several bacteria. Thank you guys, you are the wellness champions, So just popping one pill is not going to cure you. You have to do a lot of the right things. Maybe in 10 years time, we're going to have a much better idea of, take this, and this drug and use these oxygen therapies and use this and this, and you are going to be recovering. And the sooner you catch it, the quicker you can recover. But it does take work and it takes a lot of things. But albendazole is just one of the antiparasitic drugs that is helpful. It has not cured a single one of the wellness champions by itself yet, just so you know that. It's not like I got to go out and buy it. Just because when I did the video for antihistamines, and I was sharing about how antihistamines can help sedate the worm so we can sleep better at night, then I shared a study where they really gave high levels of antihistamines and they found a little bit of remyelination of the nerves. So then some people are thinking, oh, I'm just going to take high doses of antihistamines. Don't do it. It's dangerous. We're showing you that when you sedate these parasites well enough, that your body just starts to go back and heal. So antihistamines are not going to cure you, but sometimes we use them at night to help us sleep, to dope up the parasites so that we can sleep, because that's when they're really active. So again, with this, there are multiple antiparasitic drugs, and we have to understand there are multiple parasites. And today we're talking a lot more about worms. And that's new because we do talk about protozoa, which are single cell parasites. And there's all kinds of babesia. There's fungus is another type of parasite. I usually call fungus separate just because it's quite a different microorganism. But again, anything that lives off of us and lives in us is really a parasite. And so today we're talking more about worms. Then I found this crazy other article, just like I said, just the hour before I was putting this presentation together. I would love it if I had hours and hours to research, because, and I really believe it's by the grace of God, because I do a lot of asking for help, and I told him I'd give him the credit for it. So a 2016 study, I want to backtrack for a minute and talk about Dr. Alan McDonald. So what he's finding are these tiny little nematodes. They're called Microfilaria, and they're really small. The dog tapeworm would be bigger. But remember that it's not necessarily that you've got these big tapeworms crawling around in your spinal column. It's their babies. It's the larvae for the tapeworm that are the problem. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But they're finding the little Microfilaria, and those little tiny nematodes, there are thousands of different types of them. There are some that even live in garlic. You can actually go on YouTube and you can watch some, look at some garlic cloves where they take a section and they show you little worms that can infect garlic. You think, what kind of parasite would want to live in garlic? But they do. So there is this 2016 study where they're finding these little microfilaria in bone marrow extraction. So when they're, and I didn't read the whole article, like why they're taking it out, whether they're testing them for, you know, cancer. I don't know why they were taking it out, but they're finding the little worms in the spinal column. Actually, this was an accident, they said an accidental finding in the bone marrow. So this was a 65-year-old woman who had a lot of back pains. How many of you have back pains? And how often is it that it's parasites are involved in our back pains or our different joint pains? So yes, bacteria can be a problem. Yes, fungus can be a problem. But we did not know how significant parasites and even worms, because these are tiny little worms. So this was a 65-year-old woman, had backache problems, and they found little tiny parasitic worms in her bone marrow. So then I found this other really cool, it's more like it's a PDF, and it's more like discussion talking about like having these infections of the dog tapeworm, like the clinical findings, etc. All of these studies, I promise you I'm going to share with you. I've got this great page on my website, livediseasefree.com/ms-infections. So livediseasefree.com/ms-infections with an S at the end. And I promise I'm going to add those on there too. You can find Dr. Alan McDonald's lecture. If you haven't seen it, you can actually see those little tiny worms that he was finding from the spinal fluid of 10 people that have died of multiple sclerosis. So this is a 2017, it's called Human Toxocariasis and its Secondary Data Analysis. And what was so fascinating about this is they're talking about how they're finding the dog tapeworm is infecting humans also, not just animals. And it's really the larvae that are the biggest problem. And I have to go back and see, but I know that larvae can live, the babies can live in the immature state a lot longer than you would think. So if they, you know, if you're dealing with parasites, worms in your intestines, and if you just have a few, you know, you may be asymptomatic, you may not have a lot of symptoms of even gut issues, but as they become more populated in our body for various reasons, especially the overuse of antibiotics, we're out of balance, and, you know, our diet and our lifestyle and all kinds of other things and how we're infected, then they can actually, you know, through leaky gut, etc., they move into the blood and they travel around and they can cross the blood-brain barrier and they can move into different parts of the body. So when they're in, for example, if they're in the liver, we can have an enlarged liver and we can have cysts on our liver. When we can also have fevers if we have too many of them present. We can have all kinds of respiratory problems like coughing and wheezing and things like blood or pus or protein in our lungs. And also sometimes nodules, like these cysts and nodules. We can have digestive problems, obviously with parasites, enlarged spleen, and then also just like a pale, pasty look where we don't look very healthy, inflammation of our lymph nodes, so they can actually move into our lymphatic system and cause inflammation in that area. And they said that it's really, in humans, it's really the larva, it's the immature form that's causing the problem. And it's called Visceral migrans larva, which is VLM. This is exciting. This is 2017. And so they say the severity of the clinical symptoms of people with this condition is variable, and it really depends on factors such as the location and the number of the larvae present in the body, as well as the immune response to infected people. And there are other symptoms, for example, if they end up in the central nervous system, all kinds of central nervous system impairment, they say, but also convulsions. So we know with epilepsy, and I've had a student in the past that had epilepsy and multiple sclerosis. And epilepsy can be as simple as a cyst in your brain. Your body will form a cyst. It's kind of like it's enclosing infection, like a parasite, could be other. And so just this little immature form of a parasite getting into the brain, and I believe it's a pig, might be the pig tapeworm that they're saying, because I've read this before. And go ahead and look this up yourself. It's so really exciting. And so it can cause different seizures, for example, and also behavioral disorders. Like, how many of our children are dealing with all of these behavioral disorders? What part of that is due to parasites? I believe a big part of it is because Carrie Rivera, a dear friend of mine, who's helping so many children recover from autism, they are infested with parasites, the children are. And as they are treating the different types, the candida and the parasites, etc., these kids are becoming symptom-free of autism. And that is so important. Number one, the children suffer terribly, the parents suffer terribly. This whole autism and learning and behavioral and disorders is epidemic. Right now, 54% of our kids, over half of our kids, have some type of a health condition. What is going on? And so there's lots of factors. I'll talk about it some other time, but one of the factors, these kids are loaded with parasites. They really are, because I've seen the pictures. She's written a book. If you have any family members that are dealing with children that are suffering with autism, her book is Healing the Symptoms Known as Autism by Carrie Rivera. Amazing book. Make sure to check into that. And so anyhow, getting back to this, how exciting is this? So for those of us that are recovering from chronic disease, we have to remember that it's not necessarily only those tiny little nematodes. It could also be easily immature forms of other parasites. And so this is where, I am pressing really hard, working with labs, trying to get better and better tests. And the more we spread this word, the more you guys share this video and help us to get, I know that there are doctors that listen to my work and listen to the videos, and integrative healthcare professionals, the more of them that see this, and I know a lot of my students are sharing these videos with their healthcare providers, then the more we can start to say, we need to do some testing. We need to go back to common sense and go back to, like, this is not a mystery. Our immune system is not attacking itself for no good reason. And is it really attacking itself, or is this inflammation caused by infections? And honestly, it is the second. It is inflammation from the infections is causing the disease. And yes, there gets to be a point where the war is unfair, out of, like, when we get too many of these infections. And just one other little point, which I'll talk about more, but the sad thing is when we have some of these parasitic infections and we go on these strong steroids, we can actually end up with a hyperinfection, and that's in the research also. So I'm going to be sharing lots more about this. This is really, really exciting, and we can bring change together as long as we work together and help get the word out. So I'm going to go to see if you guys have any questions. And if you've just found me and you're like, Pam, this sounds incredible, that we could actually treat infections like parasites and fungus and possibly Lyme disease, and we can get our life back. Yes, lots of wellness champions have done that. If this is your first time finding me, make sure to watch my videos, subscribe to Live Disease Free channel on YouTube, or even go onto the Facebook. And then also, if you're at that, and watch all my videos and get to know what I'm teaching, and if you believe in it, and if you're at that place, okay, I'm ready. I've watched your videos. I've started changing my diet. I've started implementing all the things you shared, and I'm starting to feel better. Or maybe you're somebody who's spent a fortune on your health and you've been searching and searching for answers. What you need to do is watch my masterclass training. It will explain a lot more about these infections, the steps we take to recover, tons of case studies from the wellness champions, and some of them are on the event watching right now. And so I can help you. You can start on this journey to recover. Many of us have, and many, many more of us will in the next little while. We're getting more practitioners to understand this. We are sharing the research, the successes, and I've got tons and tons of successes that you can go on our website, Live Disease Free. You can hear from the wellness champions. So I'm so excited to spend this time with you, because it is very exciting. So that just helps us to see. So the more we understand which types of infections we have, especially which exact parasites we have, then we can hone in on more appropriate treatments. And then also we have to remember that the drugs are not perfect. So that's where we're layering different things to help us to really treat these infections more effectively. Because remember, the eggs can lie in us dormant for several months without even dying. They can just sit there for several months, and we have to treat long enough. So we have to treat effectively enough, but we also have to treat long enough. So I don't know if you're excited as I am, but I'm super excited. And like I said, there is just so much out there that's coming out. It's really an exciting time. So I'll see if there's any questions that you have. Let me see. Hi, Penny. Thank you for your kind words. Hi, Allison. It's working. Yay. So Allison is treating these parasites. And Penny, you don't know why everyone stopped treating for parasites. My mom is 80, and she said in her sibling, yeah, that's true. In the previous generations, even when I'm 57, so even when I was a child, 6 children living way out in the prairies, in the boondocks, and on the farm, and the doctor would deworm us every year. And that was just a simple deworming. And I just want to, before I forget, I just want to say too that, you know, if you're dealing with neurological disease and you think, oh, I'm just going to go to the health or the drugstore and I'm just going to get an over-the-counter deworming. Remember, these little parasites are deep in your body. They can be in your bone marrow. They can be in your spinal fluid, in your central nervous system. So if you're dealing with any type of chronic disease symptoms, you have to understand that just the basic deworming, the ones that get rid of pinworms, etc., it's not going to do the trick. You have to work with somebody. And that's what we have is the Academy, where we help you to treat them effectively. It does take work and it does take strategy for sure. But in my day, they did deworm us. And, you know, I would really hope that, you know, it's just, I have no idea why we don't deworm anymore. Why we think that in North America, we don't have parasites. And in all of the Europe and Australia, New Zealand, all of the industrial countries, that we no longer have parasites. It's a third world country issue. It is not. You know, it's everywhere. Even if you're vegan, it can come from on the produce. It's everywhere. You can go into town. You can eat in restaurants. You can get it from somebody who didn't wash their hands and they're preparing your food. Parasites are a part of life. But really what's changed for our generation, like starting with my mom's, is the overuse of antibiotics. So when we had this natural defense, we had all these microbes, this ecosystem, the parasites could not really establish themselves very well in us. But many of us, like myself, I was up for months on tetracycline for acne. And then we strip away, we devastate that beautiful ecosystem that we have, and we end up with all of these bad microbes growing. And they grow and grow and grow, and we don't know why we're dealing with stomach aches and constipation and bloating and possibly diarrhea. And then eventually we have leaky gut, and then they start to move into our blood, and they start to move into our liver, and we have liver issues. They move into the gallbladder, and we have gallbladder issues. So what do? We cut out the gallbladder. They move, for some of us really unlucky, they go into the central nervous system, and we can have different types. So that's the thing, is with multiple sclerosis, we don't all have exactly the same parasites in exactly the same concentrations and exactly the same fungus. So this and bacteria, etc. Very good similarities, large similarities, but we have to treat. So you're absolutely right. And so, Penny, is it that if we were treating, this is what some of these wonderful hero doctors that I follow, they basically say, you know, if we were treating parasites, we would not need all of these expensive disease-modifying drugs, right? We would not have all of these diseases. So all of these industries that have developed, and I'm not blaming anyone, I honestly believe that our doctors, they are trained and they are just doing their best with what they have, what they know, but somehow along the way, we've lost common sense. We have lost, we're not thinking anymore, and we're just, it's awful. So just go back to common sense, right? Go back to common sense. You know you've had gut issues for many years if you're sick, and you need to be working on not mysterious and not suppressing your immune system, but, and please, I'm not saying stop your medication, but work with your doctor, but maybe you need to take a different path. Maybe you need to start, like what I did, is go down a different path, treat infections, treat the root cause, get your life back. And the sooner you do it, the easier. It's still going to be work, but it's not as hard as if you've been suffering for many, many years. It is more work, but it's still rewarding. And I always say that the bigger the challenge, the sweeter the reward, right? So the greater the challenger, the sweeter the victory. That was actually my saying, the sweeter the victory. And I really believe that. So some of you have suffered terribly, And when you find that right treatment, so there again, with maybe some of the, advanced, this is where we're looking, maybe we need to be looking at these tapeworms, because there are multiple tapeworms. And talking to different pharmacists, I'm working with doctors and pharmacists and labs, and they're saying, yeah, there's all these different types of tapeworms. So we need to be really working in that direction. So for those of you that are working ahead in the Live Disease Free Academy, you are the trailblazers. I call you the pioneers, right? And you guys are the ones that are blazing a trail for the rest of everyone else. And I honor you, and you are my heroes. All right, back to your questions just for a couple more minutes here, and then I'll let you go. Hi, Mariella, and hi, Debbie. What would you recommend for kids with possible infections and parasites? Well, that's tricky, because most of our doctors are not comfortable treating parasites in our kids. And there is one over-the-counter, I don't know which country you're commenting from, but there is like a pinworm medication, but it's not really going to treat. So this is where you have to work with someone. And this is where maybe you want to reach out to us, because what I do, like, we're working with a lot of really sick people. But the key is we're going to be attracting a lot more people that are like, I don't want to be in that boat. I want to learn how to be not my own doctor, but my own healthcare advocate. I want to learn how to be the director of my health and my family's health, because then you truly stop the disease epidemic and prevent it from going through your family and all of your extended family and your loved ones, etc. That's really how things are going to change. So you have to find somebody. That's what we do in the program. We have a lot of experience. We're building a network of doctors. That's how new this is. Like, we're just getting more and more doctors in we're in over 15 countries now, and working with pharmacists. A lot of the pharmacists don't carry any of these antiparasitic drugs, or very few of them. They are not comfortable. Like, they'll say, oh, your doctor prescribed this medication at this dose. Well, I need to see in the research, I don't know if this is safe, and I need to contact the doctor, and they become a pain for the doctor. So we're working with with pharmacies that carry these drugs. They have been prescribing them, they're comfortable, and then working more and more and educating the doctors. And so even finding a doctor, like a lot of my students, they'll find a doctor that will say, yes, I'm interested in helping you treat parasites, but I really don't have a lot of experience. So then we have a members area for the practitioners, and we're working with them. And very often I even talk with them, just sharing what we're doing, what we're seeing, the research, the protocols, and we're bringing change as quick as possible. But yes, Mariella, it's so important. We deworm our dogs. They say to do it every 3 months, but even twice a year. And some of my students, like, I deworm my dogs, my cats, my horses, my cattle. Never in a million years did I ever think that I would be using the medication that I give to my cows. Seriously. But this person is no longer, well, last I heard from him, he's just starting to treat right now, 5 days without his cane. Amazing. He still has more work to do, but just with treating, maybe within 2 weeks of starting to treat, he actually went 5 days without his cane. That's the exciting thing. But again, not everybody is cookie cutter that way. I wish it was, because trust me, it would be glorious, but we're getting there. We're working really hard. Hi, Debbie and Melissa and Julia and Oksana. Hi, Pam. Yes, and I appreciate sharing all of this with you. And I really believe it's by the grace of God. And I promised him I'd give him credit for it. And so I am going to give him credit, because I'm finding some pretty exciting research. And hi, Judy and Allison. You are so welcome, Judy. And Tina. Hi, Kendra. What about wormwood for them? Yes, wormwood is really great. But again, I don't believe that the wormwood is going to get deep enough into the body. And so that's why we're using multiple different approaches. So what the doctors that we're working with, what they will do is they will prescribe, 3 to 5 antiparasitic drugs with wormwood, possibly with with oxygen therapies. It takes strategy. And again, what I've seen in my students is that if you just try to treat them without changing your diet and supporting the body, the drugs don't work very good. We have to stop feeding them, and that's the Live Disease Free eating plan. And just put a little bug in your ear, that I'm going to be meeting with a very, very well-known, renowned, exceptional chef. We're so blessed to work with him. And there's so many books on keto, and I love keto, but that's not good enough for those of us that are recovering from chronic disease. And I just don't think it's as, I like to have more vegetables, right? And a lot of us with a history of chronic disease, we don't do well with a lot of dairy. And then there is paleo, which is really great, but if you have chronic disease, it's not enough. You're still feeding the infections too much. So the Live Disease-Free Eating Plan is, high vegetables. And if you want to find out more about it, I did do a video, like what I eat and the eating plan, but we are going to have a lot more resources. And I'm really excited to team up with him because he is so creative. He makes things taste amazing. His name is Chef Chris Barton, and so I'm excited to meet up with him next week. And we've got some great things coming for you. I'm really hoping we can create something not just for our students, but also for the masses, which is exciting, to really show you how to eat, which supports the treatment of these infections really well. It's such a game changer for my students. When they're following the eating plan well, they start to have a lot of symptom improvement because those little worms are not fed as much. They're kind of hungry. They're kind of slow, quiet. They're a little more quiet. The inflammation goes down and people start feeling better. But you still have to treat them. Otherwise, if you eat the wrong foods, etc., they start to get active again. So wormwood is helpful, but it's not by itself. It is not enough for chronic disease. And there again, it's, you can go into the health food stores and they have some great blends, but they're just not effective enough. If you're a really healthy person, you have no chronic disease, you can try that, and it will probably take out some parasites if it's a good product out of your intestines, but you're dealing with almost 30 feet of intestines. And we know that the bigger worms, which are really common, like over a foot to 2.5 feet, our students are passing in, even students that don't have multiple sclerosis. People that have no chronic disease are carrying these big worms a lot of times, especially if, let's say I shouldn't say especially, but some of the students we've looked at that have lived on farms, etc., the more animals you're around, you love animals, the more that you're around them, you can pick them up. And again, those would not be causing disease, but they create a toxic environment inside of us. As they are releasing their waste matter in us, they are infecting us with whatever is growing in them and their waste material, and it becomes a breeding ground for other parasites and fungus also. So that's why Dr. Klinghardt, one of the beautiful hero doctors that I love and follow, he is one of my heroes. He says, the more you deworm, the longer you live. The more you deworm, the longer you live. And I really believe it. Hi, Tina and Chris. And where are we at here? Dana, I learned something new from you each time. Well, that is the whole point. That is why I do this. Thank you for your kind words. Hi, Dan. Hi, Katie, Jeanette. So I hope that those of you that have been following me a while, you're really starting to see like, oh my gosh, this is not a mystery. If I've been treating infections and I'm not symptom-free, I just need to work a little harder. These are, they're deep in our body. We're dealing with sometimes thousands of them. We're dealing with eggs. We're dealing with the immature forms. And sometimes maybe the drugs will treat one form, but maybe not the immature form. It'll treat the immature form, but not the adult form. And so that is the dilemma we're dealing with. But the exciting thing is we are going to start having tests. I'm hoping by summertime, we can start having tests because I'm working with an amazing lab and I'm going to work with others. Whoever will help us the sooner. And then too, wellness champions, if you're on this event right now, before we were taking pictures of the parasites we were passing, now we're collecting them in little jars with alcohol, right? And then we can submit them to labs that can actually look and say, oh, this is what type of a worm. Oh my gosh, we're seeing this type of parasite so common. Right? And so remember, it might not be that adult that's living in your intestines, but it could be their babies that have crossed through the blood and gone into your central nervous system. Thanks for all the love and all the interaction. So again, I'm going to wrap this up here. Thank you for all your kind words. So if you have just found me, and if you're at that place, you're like, Pam, I've been working with integrative healthcare providers, which I love, but I'm just still sick. I'm not getting better. Watch my masterclass training. It's not just for MS. I do attract a lot of MS, people that suffer with MS, and so I do talk a lot to them, but it's infections that are causing all disease symptoms, whether it's autoimmune of some sort, whether it's cancer, whether it is heart disease, it is inflammation. Inflammation is caused by infection. So with that, watch my masterclass training. See that there is hope for you. See that there is a better way. And then if you're ready, you can literally book a time to chat with me and you can get started right away. You can start treating, not treating right away, but starting to prep for treating and taking your life back this year, going down a different path, the path that the Wellness Champions and myself have gone down. Next week, I am not going to be here. I have another important meeting, so I won't be able to be here, but I will be back the following week and really talking a lot about when we have chronic disease. What I see so commonly is that people with chronic disease are dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety. And why is that? How is that? Is it that we're depressed because of our condition, or is it that these infections are really causing inflammation in our brains? We're going to talk a lot more about that, because depression is such a big thing these days, even in people that don't have chronic disease, and anxiety. So, and as I shared on this call, oh, I forgot to mention just the last little bit here, because there are some, oh, maybe I did share all of this. I just want to make sure that I did share it all. No, I didn't. I got sidetracked on the central nervous system. So the dog tapeworm inside of us, the little tiny immature forms that move around, they can move into our eyes too. I forgot. I just wanted to go through that list. And so we can either not see as well, we can have pain in our eyes, we can also have, where one of our eyes kind of moves inward a little bit more. We might be cross-eyed. We may end up with one eye moving outward a little bit more, up or down. So when you see somebody with that in your mind, you're going to think, oh my gosh, it's probably a parasite in your eye. And then cataracts and optic neuritis. So they're talking about all of this, and eventually it can lead to blindness. So parasites in the eye. And again, the symptoms presented by individuals are related to where the larvae, where the babies are migrating and living. All right, so that's the key. That's what you're learning today, is that it's not just the adult worms. It's not just those little nematodes I was talking about. And as this comes out more and more, it's super exciting. With that, I'm going to let you guys go, and we will talk to you on the next live, next Facebook Live, which will be in 2 weeks. Take care and bye-bye for now.